Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Tes Vav Amud Beis 15b of Mesechus Megillah. We're on the very last line of the page. And Achashverosh was having trouble sleeping. They brought him the book of Chronicles, and it says, towards the end of the bottom line, Vayimatzei Kasuv. And it was found that it was written there. And the pasuk goes on to say that it was written that Mordechai had saved the king's life earlier on. And the Gemara says, Ksav mi ba'ilei. It should have said in the pasuk, Vayimatzei Ksav, like written already. Kasuv, the Gemara understands, Rashi explains, implies like very recently written. But really this was written a long time ago. So why does it say that it was, why does it say in a way that implies that it was just written? So Melamed, this teaches me Sheshimshi Mochek v'Gavriel Kosev, that Shimshi, the Sofer, the writer of the king, the scribe of the king, was trying to erase what was written there. V'Gavriel Kosev, and Gavriel, the Malach, the angel Gavriel, came and was writing it back in. Who was this Shimshi? So Rashi tells us that Shimshi appears in the book of Ezra. He was the Sofer already for the kings that preceded Achashverosh. He was the one who wrote the document that stopped the building of the Beis Hamikdash. He was someone who hated the Jews, and therefore he didn't want Mordechai to get any credit and reward. So therefore he tried to erase that Mordechai had saved the king, and the Malach Gavriel came and wrote it back in. And that's why it says it was Kasuv, it was written recently, because Gavriel, the angel, wrote it in. Amar Rabbi Asi said, Darash Rab Shila Ish Kvar Tamrasa. Rab Shila from the village of Tamarta made the following teaching based on this. He said, Umak Sav Shelamata Shel Izchusan Shel Yisrael Eino Nimchak. If something down here in this world that's written and it's a merit for the Jewish people, it doesn't get erased, even though somebody tried to erase it. God, Hashem, did not allow it to be erased. So, Ksav Shelamala Lo Kol Shekain. So, something that's written in the heavens that's good for the Jewish people, all the more so that it can't get erased if there's a good decree out there for us. Fine. Now, Achashverosh asked his servants what was done for Mordechai as a reward, and they said, Lo na'asa imo davar, nothing was done for him. Amar Rava said about this, Lo mipnei she'ohavim es Mordechai, they didn't say this because they loved Mordechai and they wanted him to be rewarded, Elo b'nei she'sonin es Haman, but rather because they hated Haman. They knew that Haman was the enemy of Mordechai. Haman hated Mordechai, and they hated Haman. He was this big shot who had risen to power and made people bow to him, etc. So the servants of the king hated Haman, and therefore they wanted to see Mordechai succeed. So they said it was true, but they made sure to say nothing was done for Mordechai. Fine. There could also be an implication, I think I saw this in the commentaries, that you see they didn't have such a love for Mordechai the way that they say, Lo na'asa imo davar, we didn't do even anything for him. Not that we have to do a lot for him, but we didn't do even anything for him. So they were already implying that not much should be done for Mordechai because they didn't love Mordechai either. Okay, now the pasuk says that Haman was coming at that time to get permission from the king to hang Mordechai al ha'etz asher heichin lo, on the tree, on the gallows that he had prepared for him. So the Gemara darshans, the Gemara says heichin lo, Tana lo heichin, was taught that it really means that he prepared for himself. Who's the him in the sentence? Asher heichin lo, that he prepared for him. The him in this case is himself, because he's the one who ended up being hung on the gallows. That's hinted to in the pasuk. So Achashverosh asked Haman, what should we do for a man whom the king wishes to honor? Haman said, he must be talking about me. He said, dress him up in the king's clothes and ride him around on the king's horse and have somebody announce before him, so should be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor. So Achashverosh turns to Mordechai and turns to Haman and he says, go and do that, v'asechein l'Mordechai. Go do that for Mordechai. And the pasuk actually says, asechein l'Mordechai ha-Yehudi ha-Yoshev b'shar HaMelech. To Mordechai, the Jew who sits by the king's gate. So he said, says the Gemara, he said, go do this for Mordechai. Amar le manu Mordechai. So Haman played dumb. He said, who's this Mordechai? Who's Mordechai? Amar le ha-Yehudi, Mordechai the Jew. Amar le, Haman said, Tuva Mordechai Yekab Yehudai. There's many Jews named Yehuda. It's a popular name amongst the Yehudim. There's many, not the name Yehuda. There's many Mordechais amongst the Jews. So Amar le, so he said to him, Ha-Yoshev b'shar HaMelech, the one that sits at the king's gate. That's the one I'm talking about. So that's the pasuk, that's why it says, to go do to Mordechai, Ha-Yehudi, Ha-Yoshev b'shar HaMelech. Mordechai the Jew sits by the king's gate. Amar le, so Haman said to him, he doesn't need this big honor. Sagi le b'chad diskarta. It's enough, just give him a village. Give him a village, he could collect taxes from it, he'll make some money that way. Inami b'chad nahar, give him a river that he could charge people for crossing it. But you don't have to give him such a big reward of riding him around on the king's horse, etc. Amar le, so Achashverosh said, Ha-nami havle, oh, give him that too. Al tapel davar mikol asher dibarta. Don't skip out on anything that you spoke about. Meaning that that's the pasuk, that Achashverosh says, don't leave anything out, implying that there were more things that he had mentioned, and these are the examples the Gemara suggests. Okay, so Haman took the clothes of the king and the horse of the king, and he went to find Mordechai so that he could do as he was told. So he went and he found that the rabbis were sitting in front of Mordechai. He was showing them the laws of Kmitza. Kmitza is the process of removing flour to put on the Mizbeach for a mincha offering. It's done with the two fingers, and it's scooped up like this, and you wipe off any extra, with three fingers, and then you wipe off any. It's only the flour that's contained in the fingers, and it's put on the Mizbeach. So he was showing them how to do this. Rashi says because it was Pesach, it was the time to bring the Karban Omer. Karban Omer is a mincha offering, a flour offering. It's a barley flour offering, but it's a flour offering, and that's what he was demonstrating for them. So, it's also worth noting. It's a powerful imagery. Here they had a decree on their heads of destruction, annihilation, and they're not just learning the halachos. They're being demonstrated. It's like when we come back to the Beis HaMikdash, this is how we're going to do it. That they maintained their hope of salvation. So, okay, now Kivan dechazie Mordechai, when Mordechai saw Haman de apik lekable, that he was coming to get him, visuse mechad biyadeh, and his horse was being led in his hand. So Mirsas, Mordechai got very scared. He saw Haman approaching. What's he doing here? Amar lu Rabbanan, he said to the other rabbis, Hai Rashia l'miktal nafshi kasi, this Rasha, this wicked person, he's coming to kill me. Zilu mikamei, you leave, run away, dilo sichvu bigachata, so you don't get burnt by his coal. There should be no collateral damage. He told the rabbis, flee. Gahi shaita, at that moment, nisate Mordechai. Mordechai wrapped himself in a talis. V'kamle l'tzus, and he got up to daven. Asa Haman v'yasiv le kamayu. Haman came and he sat in front of the other rabbis. V'orich, and he waited at the salak Mordechai l'tzus until Mordechai finished davening. Amar he said to the other sages there, B'mayas kiso. He said, what were you dealing with? What were you learning about? Amrulei, they said to him, Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam, when the Beis Hamikdash was standing, man de minadev mincha, maisi male kumtse sulta. If somebody would bring a voluntary mincha offering, they would bring a komet's worth of soles of fine flour, and And that's what we were learning about, the kmitza of the Karban Mincha, how that you separate the flour that goes onto the Mizbeach, onto the altar. So, Umiskaperle, that would bring a person atonement. Amar Lahu, Haman said to them, Asa mali kumsi kimcha didchu, your komets full, your handful of flour has come, vidachi asara alfi kikari kaspadidi, and it's overrode the 10,000 silver coins, silver pieces that of mine, that I tried to offer the king 10,000 silver pieces to destroy the Jewish people, and I see, Haman's already seeing that things are not things are not looking right for him, and he says, your Torah learning, your study of Kmitza, your little flour handful has overrode my 10,000 silvers. Amar Le, now Mordechai, who had finished davening, he said, Rasha, you wicked man, Eved shekana nechasim, if a slave acquires things, Eved lemi unechasim lemi, who owns the slave and who owns the property? In other words, as we mentioned from last week's Amud, Mordechai owned Haman as a slave. Haman had sold himself as a slave to Mordechai earlier, and in earlier times. And so Mordechai said to him, all that money is really mine. Fine. Amar Le, so then Haman said to him, Kum levush hanimani, come and get dressed in these clothes, the king's garbs, Rechov Haisusya, and ride on this horse. Debayilach Malka, because that's what the king wants. Amar Le, so Mordechai said, Lo yachilna adayauna lebe bani. I'm not able to until I go to the bathhouse, ve'eshko lemazia, and I also get a haircut. And a shave, I guess. Delav orech ara lishtamushi b'mani demalka, because it's not proper to wear the king's clothes looking like this. He had been fasting for 3 days. Could be he hadn't bathed for 3 days as part of that fasting, and he had his hair was growing out. So he said, I have to be better kept to wear the king's clothes. Now, meanwhile, Shadra Esther vasartinu lekulu beibani lekulu umni. So Esther, there was, I guess, some communication with Esther, and she went and she shut down all the bathhouses and all of the umni, all the tradespeople, all the barbers. So there was nowhere that there were no shops open, no bathhouses or barbers that were open that Mordechai could go to. Why did they do this? Because now Haman would have to do it himself. He would have to serve Mordechai even more. Aile ihu lebeibani. So Haman took him to a bathhouse. Ve'aschem, he cleaned him. Ve'azel ve'aisi zuzo mibeise, and then he went and got scissors from his house. Ve'kashakol be'mazia, and he gave him a haircut. V'hadi dekashakole, while he was cutting his hair, ingid ve'itnach, he moaned and groaned. Amar Le, so Mordechai said to Haman, Amaika misnachas, why are you groaning? What are you complaining about? Amar Le, Haman said, Gavra dahava chashiv le lamalka mikulu rav rivenoi. A man who was the most important to the king more than anyone else, any other officers, hashta lishavye balani v'saper, now he has to be a bathhouse attendant and a barber. Amar Le, Mordechai said to him, Rasha, wicked man, v'lav saper shel kvar kartzum ha'isa, weren't you not the barber of the village of Kartzum? You used to be a barber. That's why I wanted you to give the haircut. Tana, I was indeed talking a brisa, Haman saper shel kvar kartzum haya esher mushtayim shana. He was the barber in this village of Kartzum for 22 years. So he had experience. Bazar d'shaklinu lemazia, after he had given him his haircut, Lavshinu lemane, he dressed him up in the king's clothes. Amar Le, Haman said to Mordechai, Sak v'rachav, climb up onto the horse and ride. Amar Le, Mordechai said, Lo yachilna, I can't. Dekachishna chile mimei tanisa, my strength has weakened from the days of fasting. He had been fasting for, I guess, 2 days at this point, and he said, I'm too weak to climb onto the horse myself. Gachen v'salek. So Haman bent down, and Mordechai climbed up on him onto the horse. Kisalek, as he was getting up, ba'at bei. Mordechai gave Haman a kick. Amarle, Haman said to him, Lo ksiv lechu, does it not say in your Torah, it's a pasuk in Mishlei, B'nefalei v'echa al tismach, at the fall of your enemies you shouldn't rejoice? How could you, step on me, kick me, and that's like celebrating my defeat? Amarle, so Mordechai said, Hanimili b'Yisrael, that's said about a Jewish enemy. Aval b'ditchu, but you, ksiv, it says about you, it says, Ve'ata abamoseino mo tidroch, and you will tread on their high places. When you defeat your enemies, you'll tread on their high places, and I'm stepping on you. You're like I'm treading on top of you. Okay. Now Haman parades Mordechai through town. Vayikra lefanav, and he called out before him. So shall be done to the man whom the king wishes his honor. When he was passing down the street of his own house in the house of Haman, his daughter, who was standing on the roof of their house, saw him. Savra, she thought, she assumed the one riding on the horse was her father, and the one leading him was Mordechai. So she wanted to embarrass Mordechai. So Shakla Atzitza the Beis Hakisei, she took the chamber pot from the Beis Hakisei, from the bathroom, which was full of dung, human dung, the Shadisei Aresha Davua, and she threw it on her father's head. She was standing on the roof, she poured it out onto the head of the man leading the horse, who she assumed was Mordechai, but it was really her father Haman. Daliena, he lifted up his eyes. He had been, I guess, looking down. He lifted up his eyes, and she saw it was her father. So she fell off the roof. She was so shocked that she had done this to her father, she fell off the roof to the ground, and she died. That's what it means when it says in the pasuk after this episode. It says, Vayasha Mordechai al Shara Melech, and Mordechai returned to the gate of the king. Amar Rav Sheshes said, Sheshav l'sakol tani. So it means he returned. What does it mean he returned? He returned to what he had been doing before, to wearing sackcloth and fasting. He went right back to davening, to praying. V'Haman, the pasuk says, and Haman nitchafel be, so he hurried to his house, avel v'chafuy rosh, in mourning and with his head covered. What does that mean? Why was he in mourning? So again, the simple is because he's mourning what it's become. Look what's happened. He had to lead Mordechai on the horse. Things are not working out for him, and but the Gemara says no. Again, with what was in his head, it was covered. Maybe he covered his face in embarrassment. Says the Gemara, Avel albito. He was mourning the death of his daughter, who had fallen from the roof and died. V'chafuy rosh, and with his head covered because of all the stuff that she had poured. She'irolo, and what had happened to him with the stuff that she had poured on his head. He gets home by Yisafer among Zeresh Ishtoch Lavav, and he tells over to Zeresh, his wife, and to all of his loved ones, everything that has befallen him. And the pasuk goes on, and it says, and his Vayomru lo chachamav Zeresh Ishtoch, and his wise men and Zeresh said to him, if Mordechai is from the seed of the Jewish people, once you've started to fall against him, you're not going to be able to defeat him. Now, Karilu Ohavav, at first it just calls them his loved ones. It says he said to Zeresh, his wife, and all of his loved ones. But when they respond, it says, and his wise ones said to him. The Karilu Chachamav, and then it calls them his wise ones. Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol Omer Davar Chachma, anybody who says something wise, even from amongst the nations, Nikra Chacham, they're called wise. So, since his loved ones had a very wise response to him, so it calls them his wise ones. What did they say? They said, Im mizera Yehudim Mordechai v'gomer, if Mordechai is from the seed of the Jews, the descendants of the Jews, then you won't be able, once you've started to fall before him, you won't be able to defeat him. So the Gemara, though, interprets this pasuk as follows: not if he's a Jew, but rather if he's a specific kind of Jew. Im mizar hayudim, if he's from a certain seed of the Jews, then you won't be able to defeat him. Amrulei, they said to him, Im mishar shvatim ka'asi yachatla, if he's from the other tribes, you could defeat him. Ve'im mishevet Yehuda u'Binyamin ve'Ephraim u'Menashe lo yachatla. But if he's from any of these tribes, Yehuda, Binyamin, Ephraim, and Menashe, you will not be able to defeat him. Yehuda, dichsiv, because about Yehuda it says, Yadcha ba'aref ayvecha, your hand will be at the neck of your enemy. And Enoch and the other ones, dichsibu, it says about them, the first pasuk was a pasuk in Parshas Vayechi. It's part of Yaakov's bracha to Yehuda. This next pasuk is a pasuk in Tehillim. It says, Lifnei Ephraim u'Binyamin u'Menashe ora es gvurasecha. In front of Ephraim, Binyamin, and Menashe, awaken your strength and go and save the Jewish people. So Hashem, awaken your strength. So with these tribes, it seems especially Hashem awakens his strength. So they said, if he's from any of these tribes, you don't have a chance. And indeed, he was from the tribe of Binyamin. And they said, Ki nafol tipol lefanav, you will surely fall before him. But it says a double language, nafol tipol, you will fall. So Darish Rabbi Yehuda bar Yilai, Rabbi Yehuda bar Yilai explained, Shtei nafilos halalu lama, what are these two fallings? Nafol tipol. Amru, they said to Haman, Umazu meshula la'afar meshula kochavim. This nation is compared to both dust and also compared to the stars. Right? Avraham Avinu was promised that his nation, his people will be like dust of the earth, and they'll be like the stars. What does that represent? They are like dust and they're like stars. It represents kishehin yarding ad afar. When they go down, they go all the way down. When the Jews are going through difficulties, they go all the way to the dirt. That's why they're compared to dirt. Baruch kishehin olin, but when they are on the rise, olin ad lekochavim, they go up to the stars. So how does that explain the double language ki nafol tipol? Why is it two nefilos? It's not so clear why. I'm not sure. Because they go up to the stars, yeah, not so clear to me why that explains why there's nafol tipol, you'll surely fall. Okay. So now the Haman, after he recounts this to his family, immediately the servants, the king, arrived to take him to the second feast with Esther and Achashverosh. Vayavhilu, and they hurried to bring him. That's what the pasuk says. Melame, this teaches us sheviyu bivahala, that they brought him bivahala in a hurry. But as Rashi points out, what it's telling us is that he was never had a chance to clean himself off. He still had the dung on him as they brought him to the second feast. That did not help his case, most likely. Did not endear him to Achashverosh at this feast, I would imagine. Okay. Now here is where Esther now reveals herself to Achashverosh, and she says, Ki nimkarnu ani ve'ami, me and my nation have been sold to be destroyed. And then she says, Ki ein hatzar shovet b'nezek hamalch. The enemy, literally this means like the pain is not worth the damage that it will do to the king. Meaning like this is not a good deal for the king. The to kill the Jews, the tsar, the damage it will do is not worth is not good for the king, basically. But the way that the Gemara explains it is, Amr lo, she said to him, Tsar zeh, this tsar, this enemy, this adversary, Eino shove b'nezek shamelch. He doesn't care about the king, the damage to the king. He is not concerned for how this damages the king. And then she said, Ikni ba b'Vashti v'katla. He was jealous of Vashti, and he had Vashti killed. Because remember, Memuchan, who gave the recommendation to kill Vashti, is Haman. And Hashta ikni b'didi umibayla miktuli. And now he is jealous of me, and he wants to get me killed. And he doesn't have a care for how these things impact the king. Vayomer Melech Achashverosh. And the king Achashverosh said, Vayomer Esther Amaka. And he said to Esther, the queen. So there's two Vayomers. It doesn't say what he said the first time. It says, and the king Achashverosh said, and he said to Esther the king, Vayomer Lamali. What's this? Why do I need to say and he said twice? Amar Biabo. Biabo said, Betchila Yedei Turgaman. Originally he was speaking through a translator. Meaning, he wouldn't speak directly to her. Because, although she was the queen, and he liked her and everything, but she was a commoner. And so he wouldn't speak directly to her. That's the first Vayomer. But Kiva de Amrale, Midabeshal Kasina. But now that she's revealed herself, I'm a Jew, not only am I a Jew, I come from the house of Shaul HaMelech, Shaul the king, I'm a descendant of royalty. So now, Miyad Vayomer Lester Amaka. So now, Vayomer Lester Amaka. Now he spoke directly to Esther, the queen. That's what this pasuk is bringing out. Okay, now she said, Vatomer Esther, and Esther said, Ish tzar ve'oyev Haman harazeh. Achashverosh asks, Miuzev ezehu, asher meloli bo lasos king. Who is this that wants to do this to you? And she says, Ish tzar ve'oyev, a man who's a adversary and an enemy, Haman, this evil Haman. So Amar Rabbi Lazar says, Melamed sha'isa mechave klape Achashverosh. This teaches us that she was originally pointing towards Achashverosh. Ish tzar ve'oyev, an evil man, you Achashverosh. That's what she started to point at him. Uba malach besatar yada klape Haman. But Malach came and moved her hand towards Haman. Rashi says the reason why this is implied is because she should have just said, Haman. He said, who's doing this, right? Achashverosh said, who's doing this? Who wants to do this? She should have just said, Haman. But she says, Ish tzar ve'oyev. Well, Haman. Who's she talking about? Ish tzar ve'oyev. It seems she was talking about Achashverosh. And she was going to indicate Achashverosh to you. But the Malach came and said, you're talking only about Haman here. Fine. Also, I think it says Hazeh. This one. Which means that she was pointing. Right? As we mentioned, I think we pointed this out last week, that we have the word zeh, so it implies there's something you can see and you can point at. And so it seems she was pointing at something, and why is that pointing out? Because it's to bring out this idea that originally she was pointing at something else, and then she was moved to point at Haman. Okay. Certainly a question to be asked. What was she thinking to first pointing at Achashverosh? That doesn't seem like a very wise idea. That's a question that needs to be explored. Okay, now, after she accuses Haman, it says, Ve'amelech kam b'chamaso, and the king got up in his anger, mimishtai ayayim, from this feast, and then he went out to the gardens, and then it says, Ve'amelech shav miginas habisang. It says he returned from the gardens. So it says he went out and he came and he returned. Makish Shiva Lukima. There seems to be a comparison between how he left and how he returned. In other words, he had left really to cool off. He was so angry, he went for a walk in the garden, but he came back just as angry. How come? Makima b'chima Shiva b'chima. Just like he got up in anger, he also returned in anger. De'azal ve'ashkach malachei did mulei kagavri. Because when he went out to the garden, he saw angels who were dressed like men. They looked like men. And they were in his garden, in his orchard. Vika akri le'ilni de bustani. And they were uprooting the trees that were in his bustani, again, in his gardens. Ve'amar lehu, and he said to them, Mayuv daichu, what are you doing? Cutting down my trees, or uprooting my trees. Amrle, they said, Defaktinan Haman. Haman told us to do it. So, again, these are angels pretending to be men. They said, Haman told us to cut these down. Asa lebese, he came back into the house, and the pasuk says, "Vehaman nofel hamita." That Haman was falling on the bed that Esther was on. That's a pasuk in the Megillah. He was, right, the simple reading is he was pleading for his life with her and he accidentally fell on top of her. So the Gemara asks, Nofel, he was falling in the present? Nofel, it should have said he fell on her. What does this mean that he was falling? How long can you fall for? So Amar Rabbi Elazar said, Melamed sheba malach v'pila aleh. This teaches us that a malach came, an angel came, and was pushing him onto her. So that he couldn't get up off of her, so that Achashverosh would find him on top of her. And that's why it says falling, because he was trying to get up, but he was continuing to fall, because a malach was holding him there. So Achashverosh came and he said, Amar, vai mi beisa, vai mi bra. Woe to me inside, woe to me outside. Haman, wherever I go, you're doing terrible things. You're on top of my queen, you're cutting down my trees. Vayomer HaMelech, and the king said, Hagam l'chvosh hamalkah imi babayis, are you going to conquer my queen with me in the house? At that moment, Vayomer Charvona, and it says, Echad mi asar isim, one of the servants, he said that here's the gallows that Haman made for Mordechai. It's 50 amos high, etc. So Charvona was there. He said it's ready. We could hang Haman on it, basically. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, Af Charvona Rasha Be'osa Eitzahaya. Really, Charvona was wicked, and he was part of Haman's council. He was part of the plan to hang Mordechai. That's why he knew about the tree. That's why he knew how tall it was. He knew the details. But what happened? When he saw that it wasn't going right, Miyad Barach, he fled, not literally ran away, but he switched sides. He abandoned Haman. That's what the pasuk means when it says, in Eov it says, Vayashlech alav, that God will send a punishment on someone, v'lo yachmo, miyado, and he won't have mercy. Baroach yivrach, he will run away. The other evil people who are on that side, they'll run away. They'll abandon their comrade when they see him being punished. And that's what Charvona did. He abandoned Haman and left him for dead, basically. After they hung Haman, it says that the anger of the king was forgotten, abated. Shtei shchichos halo lama. Shachacha, with two chafs, is like extra. It could have just said like shacha or shachach or something without the two chafs. So it seems like there's a double entendre here. There's a double intent here with the shachacha. So what are these two abatements of anger? Says the Gemara, Achash shel malchus shel olam v'achash shel Achashverosh. One belonging to the king of the world and one belonging to the king Achashverosh. So when it says v'chamas hanelach shachacha, the anger of the king abated. Two kings' anger abated. The anger of God, now that things had been righted, at least to some extent, that Haman was killed, or the anger of, and as well the anger of Achashverosh. The Amrilan, some say Achash shel Esther v'Achash shel Vashti. Some say no. They're both the anger of Achashverosh, but there were two separate things that he was angry at Haman for. He was angry at Haman for killing Vashti, for instructing him to kill Vashti, and he was angry at him for everything that now transpired with Esther, plotting to kill her, falling on top of her, all of these things, and therefore it says shachacha twice. Two of the king's angers abated upon the hanging of Haman. We will resume from here, Yimir Tzashem, next time.